What I wanted to talk about today is really around something that we started talking about in our panel discussion earlier, which is how do you start to look at the supply chain operating network as more than an IT solution, and how do you help drive adoption of the concept within your organization? And kind of coupled with that is something that I've been interested in for a long time, which is how do shipper companies make decisions around which supply chain initiatives they should implement first. So I was talking to Peter earlier about this, Peter from Goodyear, about how do they go about doing this, because they're always constrained based on resources, and they usually have corporate initiatives that may or may not be related to their supply chain objectives, and so it's just kind of interesting as to how to do that. And I mentioned in our panel discussion that I think that we as Elemica solution provider, we have an obligation to help our customers really with your business case internally, and by doing and in doing so, provide you the information that you need to quantify the value of the solution. So I want to talk a little bit about my interest in how do companies figure out which initiatives to do, and then make sure that you're aware of the tools that we have available to help you in that in your internal justifications, and won't go through all of the tools, but they're available and you'll have them on the slides when we distribute the slides. So hopefully give you some ideas, and then know that leaving you with a set of tools that can help you on that quantification. So I like this slide because it's a combination of some qualitative information and some quantitative information. And it was created by the Corporate Executive Board, and it's been several years ago, but the Corporate Executive Board's Supply Chain and Logistics group, they surveyed their members and said, based on these key supply chain metrics like inventory management or inventory turns, how do you think you're doing? And rate yourself kind of qualitatively on those key areas across the top. And then they correlated those answers with real financial results around margin and turns. And what I think is interesting about this is that it's really only until companies reach what they would consider to be world-class status before you even start to see a difference to the bottom line, or to the metrics that might be observable by the executive team. It also says to me how important it is to find initiatives to get those quick wins that's going to, that you can continually show that you're adding value. And it also says to me that you need to be patient, because you can be quite progressive in your supply chain activities and still not have, maybe the leap of improvements that you or your team was expecting. So this is kind of plea for patience here. And I also mentioned, we talked earlier, that I quite like the level 1 score metrics, and not much further down than that in SCORE. I don't know if anybody's familiar with SCORE, if you guys have tried to use or implement SCORE. It can get quite daunting. But this is a nice, great high-level level 1 metrics here that address each of the areas or the objectives that we as supply chain practitioners know to be important, and also link pretty easily to the metrics that the CFO is going to think is important. So your revenue, your cost, as well as your balance sheet. So this is fairly simple, right? I mean, we know we can relate these two. Things are looking good here. And I don't know if you guys were here last year. We had Laura Cesari from Supply Chain Insights speak, and she's done some research. She and her company have done some research to identify and actually do the analysis to understand which specific metrics drive the most difference with regard to shareholder value. And she's done that by industry. And so we can further look at the chemical industry and say, well, the key metrics for the chemical industry are operating margin, days of inventory, and DPO, and to a lesser extent, return on assets. So we even know, based on some strong empirical, evidence, which metrics to focus even further down on. So it's all looking good, right? So just to start raining on the parade a little bit here, it's kind of often long kind of held belief that there is an inverse relationship between inventory turns and margin. And there's even some evidence that shows that that's actually accurate, that you can, even in your inventory management practices, you usually expect a lower turn on products that you consider having a lower margin. So, there's companies often get stuck at, in Laura's terms, at that intersection between improving margin and improving inventory turns. So they reach a certain point in their supply chain journey and they kind of get stuck and they don't, how do we get out of this point? And so I wanted to offer just a few ideas of some things that I'd thought about, and then also provide, again, some tools that we've put together to help you kind of nudge along and get to the next step in that journey. So I look at, as supply chain practitioners, I think we look at objectives. There's objectives around responsiveness, flexibility, reliability, and efficiency. And, to the point earlier, we can also relate those to the metrics, the financial metrics that your executives and your CFO specifically would be interested in. So that's pretty straightforward. But let's also consider, and this is, how many of you read the book, The Discipline of Market Leaders? So The Discipline of Market Leaders says, pick your competitive strategy as a company and build your entire business model and your operation around achieving that strategy, and recognizing that the other points, the other possibilities for a competitive strategy are still important, and you need to maintain a minimum level in those, but they're going to be less important than the one you've chosen as your competitive strategy. So you can't do everything. It's not like mole in the hole, right? You can't do everything. You got to pick one and align your business with that, and accept kind of lower than world-class status on the others. So I think that's an interesting concept, right? So this is loosely adapted from that. If you're going to be the low-cost leader, if you're going to lead with the highest quality solutions, if you're going to lead with service, or if your true calling, competitive strategy is around innovation, you should know that about your company. If that's something that is, pretty, it should be pretty clearly aligned with the messages that you're getting, with what you're giving to your customers, with the way you compete. So as a supply chain practitioner, know that about your company. And, what I'm offering here is just one possible way that you might consider aligning the initiatives that you need to undertake in the supply chain with that. So we could easily debate on which order of which things they should occur, but what I'm essentially saying here is you've got competing supply chain objectives. Your company has a strategy, a competitive strategy. Align your supply chain objectives with that competitive strategy, and it kind of not only helps you prioritize those initiatives, but kind of gives you a better sense for what is acceptable in terms of the metrics that you measure. And again, we can debate on which order of which things, but I think we can all agree that a company that competes as the low-cost leader should have and should design and maintain a very different looking supply chain than a company that's going to be competing on having the most innovative products and the shortest design cycles and the getting products to market as quickly as possible. So that's really the only point I'm trying to make here, and except that to really consider that and use it as a way to determine a path for how you're going to undertake the myriad of initiatives that you have available to you. So, and then, the other thing I'll say is the thing that we've heard from supply chain over the last 5-10 years has become very clear. We've heard it in several different ways. We've heard sales and ops planning and integrated business planning. We've heard the outside-in supply chain, which Elemica likes to use, but it's really about synchronizing the supply with the connecting supply to demand. So I think, as practitioners, that's one of the things we're all, let's find those initiatives to do that, because that's going to be the way that we can drive improvements in every one of these. That's how you kind of get past that stuck between margin and turns position. So looking at it that way, and then I'm going to assign, or allocate each of these objectives to a particular logistics function, and specifically logistics functions that Elemica supports. So from the standpoint of increasing velocity, if you want to take a look at time slot management, which is having your carriers book appointments at your facilities for loading or at your facilities for unloading, having your suppliers' carriers book. So that is a way that you can increase your velocity. Freight cost management, terminal and warehouse visibility, these are ways that you can end up reducing your days of inventory, taking time out of your cash-to-cash cycle. And then it goes on. So several different opportunities for implementations of solutions that can help you. And what I've done is to create a model, a quantitative model that links each of those solutions to actual value. And so I've looked at the effect on labor costs, I've looked at the effect on freight costs, and I've looked at the effect on cash to cash, and have gone through with each business process and said, well, what do we see, and what do we expect? What reductions have we seen, or what reductions would you expect? And created a big equation to quantify that. That is available, and I have allocated some pretty generic numbers in there based on what we've seen in our network, based on some industry-wide public information, and have created this that says, look, if we're just starting to talk to us and you would like to undertake some of these initiatives, we can give you, based on our generic calculator, what we expect the savings to be. I actually put it in terms of savings per shipment just to make it easier for you to do a quick evaluation. But what's behind it is a big spreadsheet model that you could work with Elemica, and we could enter your own specific information in there to get a better idea and a much better estimate of what our solutions can save for you. So, yeah, I guess in conclusion, and then we can look at some of the tools in more detail if I haven't used up my 12 minutes. In conclusion, what I'm really here to propose and be a strong proponent for is that if you find yourself stuck at that intersection of inventory turns and margin, that you consider taking a look at some of the things that I said, coming up with a list of strategic initiatives, prioritize them based on the information and the tools that Elemica has, not only from the standpoint of the quantifiable information that we can provide, but some additional tools that we have to help you rationalize the opportunities. And then at any point in the process, we are here to support you. We can engage with you at any step, but certainly using the tools that we have. I mean, we can bring that to the table in our discussions with you. So I can go through each one, or I can go through each of the tools or the details about the tool. I can pause here for questions. You're going to get all of this just real quick. It's just some more data that quantifies each of the areas, and as well as some questions around if you're for the different business processes, what questions you might consider, some provocative questions to ask your business to understand which of these areas might be of interest to you or might drive the most value for your company.